The air in that narrow hallway was so thick, so suffocating, you could almost feel it crushing your chest. All you could hear was the agonizing, dragging tick-tock of a beat-up wall clock, completely drowned out by the heavy, labored breathing of someone who had simply carried too much for too long. Down there on the scuffed and dusty hardwood floor, the worn-out wheels of a wheelchair sat dead still. It breaks my heart just picturing it, the absolute silence of being forgotten. They tell you growing old is a privilege. A blessing from God, Gloria's voiceover begins. It isn't sweet or fragile. It is gravelly, carrying the heavy, bone-deep exhaustion of a black woman who had spent 68 years surviving America. But they never warn you about the cruelest part of aging. It's when you stop bringing in a paycheck, when you outlive your usefulness, to the very kids you bled and sweat to raise. You stop being a human being to them. You become a liability, a burden, just waiting to be written off. Under the flickering, jaundiced light of the hallway bulb, Gloria looked so utterly alone, wrapped in a faded, frayed cardigan, her shoulders hunched, her head bowed low in that cramped wheelchair. At 68, that posture of pure resignation made her look less like a mother and more like a discarded piece of vintage furniture in her own damn house. Then, bang! The bedroom door violently slammed open, hitting the drywall hard enough to send chips of cheap paint raining down. That harsh, violent sound instantly shattered whatever fragile mercy was left under this roof. Out walked David, 35 years old, reeking of cheap, chemical-heavy cologne. He was wearing a glossy navy blue suit with stitching so rigid it screamed, "Knock off." He strutted with that manufactured, arrogant swagger of a man desperately trying to cosplay as the elite. And then, his freshly shined leather shoe caught the edge of an aluminum walking cane propped up next to Gloria's wheelchair. The cane clattered loudly to the floor. "Man, what the hell?" David hissed, his handsome face instantly twisting into an ugly scowl. He didn't bend down to pick it up. He didn't even apologize. Instead, he pulled his leg back and viciously kicked the cane, sending it skidding into a pile of trash in the corner. "Why is this junk always in my way? This house is cramped enough with your damn wheelchair taking up all the space." He glared at the old woman shrinking into her seat, not an ounce of pity, not a single shred of guilt. Just then, his cell phone rang, and just like that, the monster vanished. His face smoothed out, he pressed the latest iPhone to his ear and flashed a brilliant, blindingly fake smile. "Yo, what's good, my brother? Yeah, I got that real estate deal locked down. A couple $100,000 in profit is pocket change for a guy like me, you know?
Drinks on me downtown tonight, let's go!"
He let out a loud, obnoxious laugh, adjusting his perfectly lined-up haircut. But the second the call ended, that fake smile dropped dead. He whipped around, his eyes locking onto Maya. His wife, a black woman with dark, exhausted circles under her eyes, who had just timidly stepped out of the kitchen. "David." Maya stammered, nervously twisting the edge of her apron. "The pharmacy just called. Mom's arthritis medication. The price went up by $50 this month. Can you just... Are you out of your damn mind, Maya?" David roared, cutting her off and pointing a vicious finger mere inches from her face. $50 for some useless pills? I got the lease payment on the Benz due this month. I gotta maintain an image for my partners. Do you understand that? Tell her to tough it out, or drink some tap water and go to sleep. Damn it, it is always money, money, money. Stop putting this dead weight on my back. He violently snatched his leather jacket off the hook and slammed the front door so hard the frosted glass panes rattled in their frames. He walked out, leaving behind a wife silently wiping away tears of shame and an elderly, helpless mother with her head bowed in a wheelchair. It makes my blood boil just writing this. The pure, unadulterated disrespect. The son she tore her body apart to bring into this world would rather blow cash on overpriced liquor to feed his fragile ego than spend $50 to ease his own mother's physical agony. But as the sound of David's rental car engine faded down the street, something shifted in that dark hallway. The suffocating tension evaporated. The air suddenly turned ice cold. If you followed the camera panning down the wheels of that chair, past the frayed fabric of her coat, you would finally lock onto Gloria's hands. Those wrinkled, age-spotted hands weren't trembling from sorrow or pain, no. They were gripping the armrests of that wheelchair. Gripping them so hard her knuckles were turning a ghostly white. That wasn't the desperate cling of a weak old woman. That was the iron-fisted grip of a queen holding back a hurricane. Slowly, Gloria lifted her head, the hunched, defeated shoulders locked back, rigid and proud. Her chin tilted up with absolute, undeniable royalty. The faint light from the window caught her eyes. There wasn't a single tear. No foggy haze of old age. Those eyes were bottomless, pitch black, and as cold and sharp as a freshly unholstered scalpel. It was the terrifying, calm gaze of an alpha wolf watching a foolish prey dig its own grave. The corner of her mouth curled up into a slow, chilling smile. "Keep playing your part, son," she whispered into the empty room as the shadows slowly swallowed the magnificent, terrifying presence of the woman in the wheelchair. If one were to rewind the clock 30 years, the suffocating darkness of that hallway would dissolve into the blinding, sterile, fluorescent lights of a bustling 1990s airport terminal. Amidst the cacophony of rolling luggage and overlapping boarding announcements, a very different Gloria existed. They look at me now and see a frail old woman, her inner voice hummed, a steady, rhythmic cadence of pure resilience. But they forget whose shoulders they are standing on. Down on the freshly waxed linoleum, a pair of cracked, worn-out work boots stood firm. A young Gloria, barely out of her 20s, wore a generic oversized blue janitorial uniform, leaning her entire weight against a heavy yellow mop bucket. A group of white aviation executives in tailored suits walked right past her. They didn't nod, they didn't acknowledge her existence. They simply stepped right over the floor she had just broken her back to clean, leaving a trail of muddy footprints behind. She didn't cry. She didn't scream about the unfairness of it all. She just paused, resting her calloused hands on the mop handle, and looked out the massive glass windows at the private jets gleaming under the sun on the tarmac. To those executives, a black woman with a mop was just part of the scenery, invisible by design. But while they were talking down to me, they didn't realize I was listening. Gloria would later recall. I was reading their discarded financial reports in the trash. I was learning the routes, the margins, the logistics of the sky. Those muddy footprints became her blueprint. The years that followed were a grueling, unapologetic blur of late nights spent crunching numbers under a single, flickering light bulb while little David slept on a thin mattress on the floor. It was a journey of walking into marble-floored banks, being flatly denied a business loan because of the color of her skin and the lack of a ring on her finger, and walking right back out with a defiant, unbroken smile. It was the monumental day she stood on a sun-drenched tarmac in front of a modest, single-engine propeller plane, holding a clipboard that finally bore her name. Black Girl Magic wasn't just a catchy phrase for us, the truth echoed deep in her bones. It was our only method of survival. I took their leftover crumbs and baked my own damn bread. That single propeller plane eventually multiplied into a fleet of sleek black private jets. The logo Skyward Aviation gleamed in pure gold across the fuselages. It was a sprawling empire, one of the very few black-owned private airlines in the country, built from the blood and sweat of a woman who flat out refused to stay on the ground. Yet, all that golden glory felt light years away from the grim reality of the present, the rusty wheels of the wheelchair, the peeling paint of the hallway. So, why the wheelchair? Why would a self-made billionaire let a mediocre man-child scream at her in a house that she secretly owned? The answer was a cold, heartbreaking truth, because 2 months ago, I didn't just find a son. I found a vulture. The memory was still fresh, stinging like a paper cut. Just a few weeks prior, Gloria had stood perfectly healthy in her private study. Through a cracked door, she had watched David frantically picking the lock of her filing cabinet, whispering feverishly to himself as he hunted for her will, her bank statements, the deed to the house. The sheer, naked greed in his eyes wasn't just disappointing, it was lethal. I had to know she had resolved in that agonizing moment. If I stripped away the money, the empire, the power, if I was just a sick, crippled old woman. Would the boy I gave my life for still have a heart, or did I raise a monster? The wheelchair wasn't a medical necessity. It was a courtroom, and David was on trial. The climax of that trial arrived on a silent Tuesday at 2 a.m. The house was completely dark, save for the pale, ghostly moonlight spilling onto the kitchen floor. Gloria sat in her wheelchair by the counter, staring at a glass of water, resting dangerously close to the edge. She took a deep, ragged breath. This was it, the final test. With a deliberate flick of her wrist, she knocked the glass over. Crash! The sharp sound of shattering glass violently broke the silence of the sleeping house. Shards scattered across the linoleum like diamonds. Gloria reached down, intentionally pressing her palm against a jagged piece of glass. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as real, warm crimson blood welled up, dripping slowly onto the white floor tiles. Heavy footsteps thundered down the wooden stairs. David appeared at the kitchen entrance, wearing expensive silk pajamas, vigorously rubbing his eyes, furious at being woken up. "What now?" he barked, flipping on the harsh overhead light. Gloria sat there, clutching her bleeding hand. Her face was a portrait of feigned panic, but her eyes, those sharp, analyzing eyes, were locked onto her son's face, begging the universe for just one sliver of humanity. "David, I'm so sorry, my hand slipped. I'm bleeding, baby. It hurts." David stopped. He looked at his mother. He looked at the blood pooling on the floor. He didn't rush forward. He didn't grab a towel. He didn't even ask if she was okay. Instead, a look of pure, unadulterated disgust washed over his face. He let out a loud, exaggerated groan, throwing his hands up in the air as if he were the victim. "Are you kidding me right now?" David yelled, his voice dripping with venom. He carefully stepped around the broken glass, making sure his expensive slippers didn't get dirty, and opened the fridge to grab a bottle of sparkling water. "It's 2 a.m., Mom. I have a tea time with my investors at 8. Wrap it in a napkin or something and stop whining." He twisted the cap off his water, taking a long, refreshing sip, completely ignoring the blood dripping from his mother's hand. "Just don't bleed on the rug in the hallway," David commanded coldly, walking back toward the stairs. "Maya will sweep this mess up in the morning." "Unbelievable. You are literally draining the life out of me." The kitchen plunged back into darkness as he flicked the light off, leaving her alone in the shadows. Gloria didn't call out to him. She didn't cry. She calmly reached for a dish towel and tightly wrapped it around her bleeding palm. The physical sting of the cut was sharp, but it was absolutely nothing compared to the violent, irreversible death of a mother's hope. In the quiet dark of the kitchen, the loving mother took her final breath, and the ruthless CEO of Skyward Aviation finally took the wheel. "The verdict is in," her mind whispered, cold as ice, and the sentence, ... is going to be biblical. If you wanted to understand the absolute tragedy of David's existence, you didn't need to look at his bank statements. You only needed to stand in the living room of that house and simply observe the agonizing collision of two different worlds. On the surface, David curated a life designed specifically for the glowing, superficial square of an Instagram feed. He walked around with the unearned swagger of a self-made mogul. He wore designer belts with aggressively large logos, leased a pristine white Mercedes-Benz that he parked explicitly where the neighbors could see it, and spoke loudly into his phone about crypto portfolios and angel investments. But once the camera flash faded, the reality of his existence was a suffocating, crumbling facade. The house, a sturdy, 4-bedroom colonial built with good bones, didn't belong to him. Gloria had quietly purchased it years ago under a blind trust, allowing David to believe he was the master of his domain while she secretly covered the property taxes. Yet, the inside was a monument to his financial incompetence. The leather sectional couch in the living room was bought on a high-interest credit card. The massive 85-inch flat-screen TV dominating the wall was currently 3 months behind on payment plans, and bearing the crushing weight of this hollow empire was Maya. While David was out downtown buying overpriced rounds of drinks for men who secretly laughed behind his back, Maya was sitting at the chipped kitchen island, buried under a mountain of final notice envelopes. She was a beautiful, brilliant black woman whose spirit was being meticulously drained by the leech she had married. She worked 2 shifts as a registered nurse, coming home with swollen ankles and an aching back, only to transfer her hard-earned salary into a joint account that David systematically emptied to fund his delusions of grandeur. The tension in the house was a powder keg, and the spark was struck on a gloomy Thursday afternoon. The front door kicked open. David swaggered in, followed by two delivery men carrying massive, heavy cardboard boxes emblazoned with the logos of a high-end virtual reality gaming system and custom surround sound speakers. "Careful with those, guys. That's $5,000 worth of tech right there," David boasted, slipping them a $5 tip with the arrogance of a billionaire. Maya, still in her blue medical scrubs, walked out of the kitchen. Her exhausted eyes widened in sheer disbelief as she stared at the boxes occupying the hallway. "David, what is this? The electricity bill is 2 weeks overdue. They're threatening to shut off the power. How could you buy this?" "Relax, Maya, it's an investment," David dismissed her, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "I need a proper space to decompress. Successful men need high-level recreation. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under." He walked past her, scanning the living room for a place to set up his new toys. His eyes landed on a quiet, sacred corner near the bay window. It was Gloria's small, meticulously kept memorial for her late husband, Arthur. A polished mahogany side table held a folded American flag from his military service, his faded, scuffed leather work gloves, a framed black and white photograph of him smiling brightly with a young Gloria, and the antique pocket watch he had worn every single day until his heart stopped beating. Arthur was a man who had broken his back on construction sites for 30 years so his family could eat. He was the anchor that allowed Gloria's airline empire to take flight. David didn't see a father's legacy. He saw wasted square footage. "This junk has got to go," David muttered. Before Maya could even process what was happening, David grabbed a heavy-duty black trash bag from the kitchen. He marched over to the memorial table. With a callous, sweeping motion of his arm, he shoved the framed photograph, the leather gloves, and the antique pocket watch right into the plastic bag. The glass of the picture frame shattered against the hard wood floor with a sickening crack, the sound tearing through the room like a gunshot. "David, no! What are you doing?" Maya screamed, rushing forward and grabbing his arm. "Those are your father's things."
That's all your mother has left of him.
David violently yanked his arm away, his eyes flaring with a toxic, uncontrollable rage. "My father was a broke bricklayer who died with dirt under his fingernails. He didn't leave us anything but this useless, sentimental garbage. I need this corner for the subwoofers. If the old lady wants to live in the past, she can keep it in her bedroom." Maya stepped back, her hand covering her mouth, terrified by the stranger she had married. Neither of them noticed the slight creak of the hallway floorboards. Gloria sat in her wheelchair, hidden in the dense shadows just inches away from the living room archway. She had seen everything. She watched her son treat the memory of the man she loved more than life itself as disposable trash. The shattering of that picture frame wasn't just breaking glass. It was the final irreversible severing of the umbilical cord. A cold, deadly calm washed over Gloria. The pain was gone. There was only the calculated, chilling focus of a woman preparing to burn a bridge with the person standing on it. She silently rolled her wheelchair back into the darkness of her room, waiting for the night to fall. The explosion finally happened at midnight. The house was eerily quiet, save for the muffled, booming bass of David's new video game echoing from the living room. Maya was standing at the kitchen sink, aggressively scrubbing a pan, letting her quiet sobs drown in the sound of running water. The game paused. David walked into the kitchen looking for a late-night snack. He saw his wife crying, and instead of comforting her, his face hardened into a mask of pure annoyance. "Are you still crying over that trash?" David scoffed, leaning against the refrigerator. Maya violently turned off the faucet. She turned around, her chest heaving, years of suppressed resentment finally breaking through her exhaustion. "You are sick, David. You are truly sick. You spent thousands of dollars today while I was begging the pharmacy for a discount on your mother's pain medication. She is sitting in that room, in agony, and you just threw away the only things that brought her comfort." "Oh, cry me a river, Maya!" David exploded, slamming his fist onto the kitchen island so hard the ceramic fruit bowl rattled. I am sick and tired of everyone in this house treating me like the villain. Look around. We are drowning. And do you know why we are drowning? Because of her. He pointed a furious, trembling finger toward the dark hallway where Gloria's room lay. She is a parasite, Maya, David hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous, frantic whisper. She sits in that damn wheelchair all day, sucking up our money, our space, our energy. She is a dead weight, and she is pulling us straight to the bottom of the ocean. I am not going to let some crippled old woman ruin my life. Maya stared at him, her blood running cold. She is your mother, David. Where is she supposed to go? A sickening, triumphant smirk slowly crawled across David's face. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. I already figured it out, David whispered, stepping closer to Maya, his eyes wide with a manic, greedy intensity. I spent the afternoon making some calls. I found a facility down in Florida, deep in the panhandle. It's a state-run, bare-bones nursing home. Cheap, really cheap. The kind of place where they take the old folks in, and nobody ever asks questions when they don't come out. Maya's breath hitched. You want to send her away? To a state facility in another state? She doesn't know anyone there. She would be completely alone. She would be out of my hair, David snapped back. And here is the best part, Maya. I looked into the local property records. The deed to this house is technically held by some obscure corporate trust, but my lawyer buddy says with a little pressure and her signature as the primary resident, we can force a transfer of title. We pack her bags, we put her on a one-way flight out of my life, and we take the house. We sell it, we clear our debts, and we finally live the life we deserve. Maya leaned back against the sink, physically repulsed. You want to dump your mother in a swamp to steal her house? That is evil, David. I won't be a part of this. David lunged forward, grabbing Maya tightly by the shoulders, his fingers digging painfully into her skin. The facade of the charming businessman was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, violent coward. You will do exactly what I tell you, Maya, he threatened, his hot breath hitting her face. You are my wife. You will smile, you will pack her bags, and you will help me put her on that plane. If you don't, I swear to God, I will leave you drowning in the debt we created together. Do you understand me? We are getting rid of the old woman. He shoved her back, letting go of her shoulders, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Maya shaking and sobbing against the counter. But David was a fool, a loud, arrogant fool. He thought he was the mastermind. He thought he was whispering his dark, twisted secrets to a compliant wife in an empty kitchen. He didn't look down the hallway. If he had, he would have seen the faint outline of a wheelchair positioned perfectly in the pitch-black corridor. He would have seen the unblinking, obsidian eyes of Gloria Hayes cutting through the darkness, absorbing every single word, every threat, every ounce of his pathetic betrayal. Gloria slowly raised her right hand in the dark. The cut on her palm from the broken glass had stopped bleeding, leaving a jagged, dried crimson line across her skin. She stared at it, feeling the last remaining thread of maternal mercy snap, leaving behind nothing but the cold, beautiful clarity of absolute vengeance. She reached into the side pocket of her cardigan, her fingers wrapped around a heavy, encrypted satellite phone. With a slow, deliberate movement, her thumb pressed the power button. The screen illuminated her face in a harsh, blue light. She didn't cry, she didn't hesitate. She opened a secure messaging channel that connected directly to the executive board of Skyward Aviation. Her fingers flew across the keypad, typing a single chilling directive. Operation Icarus is a go. Ground all flights. Send the detail to the airport. I'm coming home. Chào bạn. Tôi đã sẵn sàng để tiếp tục rồi đây. Như chúng ta đã thống nhất, câu chuyện này đang được kể bằng tiếng Anh để giữ trọn vẹn nhịp điệu, flow và văn phong tone, cực kỳ đặc trưng của cộng đồng Mỹ gốc Phi. Ở phần trước, chúng ta đã kết thúc bằng việc bà Gloria gửi tin nhắn bí mật. Trong phần 4 này, tôi sẽ đẩy sự đạo đức giả của gã con trai lên đến đỉnh điểm. Khán giả sẽ phải chứng kiến một vở kịch tởm lợm nhất, để rồi sự căm phẫn sẽ được chuyển hóa thành sự mong chờ màn lật kèo nổ tung ở sân bay. Tôi đã miêu tả cực kỳ chi tiết diễn biến tâm lý của cả ba nhân vật, kéo dài thời lượng để tạo ra một bầu không khí ngột ngạt trước cơn bão. Moi ban chim dum vào fun 4. Part 4. The one-way ticket. The morning sun crept through the dusty blinds of the living room, casting long, fractured shadows across the floorboards. To anyone looking from the outside, it was just another quiet Friday in the suburbs. But inside the house, the air was thick with the sickening, sugary stench of a beautifully orchestrated lie. David was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Normally, David didn't emerge from his bedroom until noon on his days off, usually nursing a hangover and yelling at Maya to brew his coffee. But today, he was awake at 7 a.m. He had actually gone to the local bakery and brought back a white cardboard box of expensive artisanal pastries. He hummed a cheerful, upbeat tune as he aged them on a ceramic platter, pouring fresh orange juice into crystal glasses. He looked like the perfect, devoted family man. If you didn't know the monster hiding beneath that tailored casual sweater, you would have believed the illusion completely. Gloria sat in her wheelchair at the edge of the kitchen, her hands resting quietly in her lap. She wore her faded cardigan, her face arranged into the soft, bewildered expression of a fragile elder. Inside, however, her mind was as sharp and cold as a diamond cutter. She watched him arrange the pastries, analyzing every fake smile, every overly gentle movement. Look at him, Gloria thought, her inner voice devoid of any maternal warmth, replaced entirely by the clinical detachment of a CEO observing a hostile takeover. He's treating me like a dying dog that he's about to take behind the barn. He bought me a $12 croissant as my last meal. David wiped his hands on a towel, plastered a look of deep, soulful concern across his face, and walked over to his mother. He didn't just stand over her. He went down on one knee, bringing himself exactly to her eye level. He reached out, taking her wrinkled, age-spotted hands into his own smooth, manicured ones. "Mom," David began, his voice dripping with a soft, honeyed sympathy that made Maya, who was standing paralyzed by the sink, feel physically nauseous. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. I've been looking at you, and it breaks my heart. You look so tired. The arthritis, the stress. This house is just too chaotic for you. You need peace. You need to be pampered." Gloria made her eyes widen slightly, letting a perfect tremor enter her voice. "What are you saying, David? Are you
putting me in a home?
No, Mom, of course not," David gasped, acting incredibly offended by the very suggestion. He squeezed her hands affectionately. "I would never do that to you. Maya and we've been saving up. We wanted to do something special for you to show you how much we appreciate your sacrifices. We booked you a spot at an elite, holistic wellness retreat down in Florida." He let the lie hang in the air, glittering and beautiful. "It's a luxury resort, Mom," David continued, his eyes shining with fake enthusiasm. "Right on the water. They have 24/7 nursing staff, physical therapy in heated saltwater pools, organic meals prepared by private chefs. You'll be surrounded by nature, breathing the fresh ocean air. It's exactly what you need to heal your body." Gloria looked at him, letting a single masterful tear well up in her left eye and slide down her wrinkled cheek. She reached out with her trembling, bandaged hand, the same hand he had callously ignored bleeding just nights ago, and touched his face.
"A luxury resort?"
Gloria whispered, her voice cracking with manufactured gratitude. "But David, baby, that must cost a fortune. You shouldn't spend your money on an old woman like me." "Don't you worry about the money, Mom?" David smiled, a massive, brilliant grin that didn't reach his cold, dead eyes. "You gave me life. This is the least I can do. Our flight leaves this afternoon. I'm going to personally escort you down there and make sure you're settled like a queen." He stood up, kissing her on the forehead, the kiss of Judas. "Maya," David commanded, his tone shifting back to sharp authority as he turned to his wife. "Go to Mom's room and start packing her bags. We leave for the airport in 4 hours." Maya couldn't speak. Her throat was constricted with a mixture of terror and disgust. She gave a stiff, jerky nod and practically ran out of the kitchen, unable to look her mother-in-law in the eyes. Once inside Gloria's cramped, dark bedroom, Maya collapsed against the closed door. Her chest heaved as she gasped for air, tears of profound guilt streaming down her face. She felt like an accomplice to a murder. Trembling, she walked over to the small, rickety dresser. Resting on top of it was a manila folder David had left for her, containing the travel documents and the intake forms for the resort. Maya opened the folder. The reality of David's pure, unadulterated evil stared back at her in black and white ink. There was no luxury resort. There were no saltwater pools or organic chefs. The brochure inside the folder was printed on cheap, flimsy paper. It advertised the Whispering Pines State Care Facility, located deep in the swampy, isolated panhandle of Florida, miles away from any major city. The pictures showed a grim, cinder block building surrounded by chain-link fences. Maya, being a registered nurse, knew exactly what kind of facility this was. It was a dumping ground. It was an underfunded, overcrowded state-run warehouse where forgotten elders were strapped to beds, heavily medicated, and left to rot until the state claimed whatever pennies they had left. And then Maya saw the plane ticket. It wasn't Delta, it wasn't American Airlines. It was a notoriously terrible ultra-budget carrier known for its agonizing delays and cramped seating. But that wasn't the part that made Maya's blood run cold. She stared at the bold, black letters printed under the flight itinerary. Passenger, Gloria Hayes, ticket type, one-way, return flight. A choked sob escaped Maya's lips. She dropped the papers onto the dresser as if they were burning her fingers. He wasn't taking her on a vacation. He was exiling her. He was going to push her wheelchair into that sweltering, abusive facility, hand over her ID, turn his back, and fly home alone the very same night. The door to the bedroom suddenly clicked open, and David slipped inside, closing it quickly behind him. Maya spun around, her eyes blazing with a desperate, terrified anger. David, this is a state facility. It has a 2-star rating from the Department of Health. There are active investigations for elder neglect there. You can't send your mother to this prison. David's charming smile vanished instantly. His face hardened into a mask of pure menace. He closed the distance between them, cornering her against the dresser. "Keep your damn voice down," David hissed, grabbing her wrist with a painful, bruising grip.
We went over this last night, Maya.
The decision is made. It's a state facility because it's free. The state will take her social security checks, and she becomes their problem. I am not spending another dime on that woman. She'll die in a place like that, David, Maya pleaded, tears spilling over her eyelashes. Please, she's your mother. She changed your diapers. She fed you. You can't just throw her away on a budget airline with a one-way ticket. Watch me, David whispered, leaning in so close she could smell the peppermint on his breath. You are going to pack a small bag. Put her cheapest, ugliest clothes in it. Don't pack any of her jewelry or anything of value. Once she's admitted, her belongings become property of the ward, and I'm not giving them free assets. You pack exactly one bag, Maya, and if you say one single word to her about where she is actually going, I will make sure you are destroyed in the divorce courts. I will leave you with nothing. He let go of her wrist, shoving her slightly. He straightened his tailored sweater, his face returning to that calm, sociopathic baseline. Start packing, he ordered coldly, before opening the door and walking back out into the hallway, loudly whistling that same cheerful tune. Maya sank to her knees, burying her face in her hands. She was trapped, she was married to a monster, and she was entirely complicit in his crime. She slowly pulled a battered faux leather suitcase from under the bed and began the agonizing task of packing away an entire human life into a 20-pound carry-on. While Maya wept in the bedroom and David strutted around the living room making phone calls to real estate agents about listing the house, Gloria was left completely alone in the kitchen. The performance was paused. The fragile, trembling mother evaporated into thin air. Gloria sat up perfectly straight. Her dark, calculating eyes swept over the half-eaten pastries on the counter. She reached into the deep pocket of her cardigan and pulled out the encrypted satellite phone she had used the night before. The screen was glowing with a series of incoming high-priority messages. She opened the secure channel. The messages were from Marcus Vance, the terrifyingly efficient, ex-military head of global security and legal operations for Skyward Aviation. Vance, Operation Icarus Protocol initialized, Madam CEO. Vance, The deed to the suburban property has been officially flagged. Our legal team has blocked any attempts at title transfer by unauthorized parties. The house is locked down. Vance. We have successfully infiltrated David Hayes' personal financial networks. His credit cards, checking accounts, and the lease agreement for his vehicle are queued for immediate termination. Vance. Skyward Private Jet 01 is fueled and holding on the VIP tarmac at the international terminal. The extraction detail is locked and loaded.
Awaiting your final command.
Gloria read the messages, her face an unreadable mask of absolute power. She wasn't just preparing a defense. She was orchestrating a total, scorched earth annihilation of her son's life. She tapped the screen, her fingers moving with rapid, ruthless precision. Gloria, execute the financial freeze the exact second he passes through the airport sliding doors. Not a minute before. Let him think he is a king right until the crown falls off. Gloria, deploy the extraction team to Terminal 3. Black suits. I want a show of force. Let the public see exactly what happens when you disrespect a queen. Gloria and Vance. Have our top divorce attorneys draft an ironclad separation agreement for Maya. Add a cashier's check for $5 million from my personal offshore account. The girl is a victim, not an enemy. We are rescuing her today. Vance. Copy that, Madam CEO. See you at the terminal. Safe travels. Gloria locked the phone and slipped it back into her pocket. She looked down at the bandaged cut on her hand. She remembered the sheer disgust in David's eyes when she was bleeding on his floor. She remembered the sound of Arthur's picture frame shattering in the trash bag. There was a time, perhaps a decade ago, when she would have tried to save him. She would have sat him down, paid off his debts, and tried to teach him the value of hard work. But age gives you a very specific kind of clarity. Some branches on the family tree don't just wither. They become infected with a rot so deep, so toxic, that the only way to save the roots is to amputate the branch entirely. David thought he was pushing a helpless old woman onto a budget airline to steal her kingdom. He didn't realize that the old woman owned the sky, and she was about to drop him from 30,000 feet without a parachute.
Mom?
Gloria immediately slumped her shoulders, dropping her chin to her chest, transforming back into the frail elder just a second before Maya walked back into the kitchen. Maya was carrying the small, cheap suitcase. Her eyes were red and swollen, refusing to meet Gloria's gaze. I packed your things, Mom, Maya said, her voice trembling so violently she could barely form the words. David is pulling the car around. Gloria looked at her daughter-in-law. For a fleeting second, the terrifying CEO vanished, replaced by a genuine deep well of maternal sorrow for the pain this young woman was enduring. Gloria slowly reached out and placed her hand over Maya's trembling fingers. Thank you, Maya, Gloria said softly, embedding a hidden, profound meaning into her words that Maya couldn't yet understand. You have carried a heavy burden in this house for far too long. But I promise you, after today, you will never have to cry in this kitchen ever again. Maya sobbed, turning her face away, thinking Gloria was offering forgiveness for the nursing home. Outside, a car horn blared twice. It was David, sitting in his leased Mercedes, ready to execute his master plan. Let's go, David yelled from the driveway. Time for vacation. Gloria gripped the wheels of her chair. She pushed herself forward, rolling out of the kitchen, down the dark hallway, and toward the front door. Every squeak of the rusty wheels sounded like a countdown clock ticking down to 0. The trap was set. The pawn had taken the bait. It was time for the queen to move. The drive to the airport was a masterclass in psychological torture. David gripped the steering wheel of his leased Mercedes, aggressively weaving through the heavy afternoon traffic on the interstate. He had the radio turned up high, blasting a boastful hip-hop track about wealth and power, bobbing his head to the beat. He was practically vibrating with a sick, celebratory energy. To him, this wasn't a drive to the airport, it was a victory lap. In the back seat, the silence was suffocating. Gloria sat tucked into the corner, staring out the tinted window at the passing city skyline, her face completely unreadable. Beside her, Maya looked like a ghost. Her hands were trembling so violently in her lap that she had to interlock her fingers to keep them still. Every mile marker they passed felt like a nail being driven into her conscience. She kept looking at Gloria's frail, hunched shoulders, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. She was literally riding shotgun to a betrayal she didn't have the courage to stop. "All right, Terminal 3, David announced cheerfully, pulling the car up to the chaotic, exhaust-choked curb of the budget airline drop-off zone. End of the line. The terminal was a nightmare. It wasn't the sleek, carpeted luxury of the international gates. This was the budget concourse, a loud, overcrowded cavern of screaming children, delayed flight announcements, and exhausted travelers sitting on the dirty linoleum floors. David popped the trunk, pulled out the cheap, faux leather suitcase Maya had packed, and aggressively waved down a skycap to bring over a battered airport wheelchair. He unceremoniously helped Gloria out of the car and dropped her into the seat. He handed the single one-way ticket to Maya. "Look at this line," David groaned, checking the gold-plated fake Rolex on his wrist with a look of supreme annoyance. "I'm not waiting in this. Maya, take her to the family restroom by the food court. Wash her face, fix her hair, do whatever you need to do, so she doesn't look like a charity case when I hand her over to the gate agent. I'll go check this bag and deal with the boarding pass. You have 15 minutes. He didn't even look at his mother. He just turned on his heel and vanished into the sea of frustrated travelers. Maya grabbed the handles of the wheelchair. Her knuckles were white. Without a word, she navigated through the dense crowd, pushing Gloria toward the back of the terminal. They reached the family restroom. Maya pushed the heavy metal door open, wheeled Gloria inside, and let the door swing shut. Click. The deadbolt locked. Instantly, the deafening roar of the airport was completely cut off, replaced by the sterile, echoing hum of the fluorescent bathroom lights and the slow drip of a leaky faucet. It was an isolating, blindingly bright room, and in that quiet isolation, Maya completely shattered. She let go of the wheelchair, stumbled backward against the cold tiled wall, and slid down to the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest and began to sob. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was a visceral, agonizing weeping, her body violently shaking as the sheer weight of her guilt finally broke her spirit.
Mom!
"Mom, I am so sorry," Maya gasped, her voice completely broken, her tears dripping onto the sterile tiles. "I can't do it. I can't let him do this to you. He isn't sending you to a resort, Mom. It's a state facility. It's an awful, horrible place, and he bought you a one-way ticket. He's going to abandon you there. He's going to steal your house. I'm a coward. I'm a disgusting coward for not stopping him." She buried her face in her hands, waiting for the elderly woman to cry out, to scream, to beg for mercy. But the room remained completely silent. "Dry your tears, Maya." The voice didn't sound frail. It didn't tremble with fear or age. It was deep, resonant, and commanded the room with the terrifying authority of a judge handing down a sentence. Maya's breath hitched. She slowly lifted her tear-streaked face from her hands, confused. Gloria wasn't crying. Her back wasn't hunched. Maya watched, completely paralyzed by shock, as Gloria calmly reached down and unbuckled the footrests of the wheelchair. She placed her expensive, orthopedic shoes flat onto the tile floor. She gripped the armrests, not to hold herself up, but to push herself forward. And then, Gloria stood up. She stood up tall. Her spine was perfectly straight, her shoulders broad and squared. The elderly, pathetic woman Maya thought she knew evaporated into thin air. In her place stood a titan. Gloria reached up, unbuttoned the cheap, faded cardigan, and let it drop to the bathroom floor like a discarded snakeskin. Underneath, she was wearing a pristine, custom-tailored silk blouse that screamed of quiet, unfathomable wealth. "Mom!" Maya stammered, scrambling to her feet, pressing her back against the door. You can walk? I don't understand." Gloria took a slow, deliberate step toward her daughter-in-law. Her eyes were piercing, filled with a complex mixture of cold fury for her son and deep, profound empathy for the woman cowering before her.
"For 2 months, Maya, I sat in that chair,"
Gloria said, her voice smooth and powerful, echoing off the tile walls. "I sat there, perfectly healthy, watching my own flesh and blood measure my coffin so he could steal the gold off my teeth. I wanted to see exactly what kind of man I had raised, but more importantly, I wanted to see what kind of man you were chained to." Maya shook her head, unable to process the reality unfolding in front of her. Who Who are you? Gloria reached into her blouse and pulled out the sleek, encrypted satellite phone. She tapped the screen, bringing up a secure digital dossier, and held it out for Maya to see. Maya's eyes darted across the glowing screen. She saw bank statements with commas that didn't make sense. She saw the corporate registry of Skyward Aviation. She saw Gloria's name listed as the sole proprietor, the CEO, the absolute owner of a multi-billion-dollar empire. She saw the deed to the suburban house held securely in a trust that David could never, ever touch. "I am the woman who owns the sky," Gloria said quietly. "And David is nothing but a vulture waiting for a lion to die." Maya dropped the phone back into Gloria's hand. Her legs gave out, but before she could hit the floor, Gloria stepped forward and caught her. She wrapped her strong, capable arms around the younger woman, pulling her into a tight, fiercely protective embrace. It was an embrace that transcended the sterile confines of an airport bathroom. It was the embrace of generations of black women who had suffered in silence. "You listen to me, Maya," Gloria whispered fiercely into her ear, holding her tight as Maya openly wept onto her shoulder. "For generations, society has conditioned women like us to be the mules of the world. They tell us that to be a good black woman, we have to be ride or die. We have to endure the abuse, the financial drain, the disrespect of broken, toxic men just to keep a family together. They expect us to bleed out so a mediocre man can pretend he wears a crown." Gloria gently pulled back, holding Maya's tear-stained face in her hands, forcing the younger woman to look her directly in the eyes.
"My son is a parasite,"
Gloria stated, stating the heartbreaking truth without a flinch. "He has taken your youth. He has taken your paycheck. He has taken your joy. And today, he tried to force you to sell your soul. But the curse ends right here, Maya. Right now, in this room." Gloria reached into the inner pocket of her silk blouse and pulled out a thick, legal-sized manila envelope. She carried it over to the plastic baby changing station attached to the wall and pulled it down, creating a makeshift desk. She laid the envelope flat and opened the metal clasp. Inside were 2 documents. "My security team has been tracking David's financial fraud for weeks," Gloria explained, her tone purely business now.
"I had my top corporate attorneys draft this."
She slid the first document toward Maya. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage. An ironclad divorce decree, citing irrecoverable financial abuse and emotional distress. It demanded nothing from David, because David had nothing left to give. It simply severed the tie cleanly, completely, and forever. Maya stared at the word divorce, her heart hammered against her ribs. The thought of leaving David had crossed her mind 1,000 times, but the fear of debt, the fear of starting over with nothing, had always kept her a prisoner. "And because I know what he has stolen from you," Gloria continued softly, sliding the second piece of paper over the divorce decree. It was a certified cashier's check, drawn from a private offshore bank account. Maya gasped, clapping her hands over her mouth. The numbers on the check blurred through her tears. Pay to the order of Maya Hayes. Amount
$5 million?
Maya choked out, looking from the check to Gloria, absolutely terrified by the sheer magnitude of the paper sitting on the plastic changing table. "Mom, no. I can't take this. I was going to let him put you on that plane. I'm guilty too." "You were surviving, Maya," Gloria corrected her sharply, but with overwhelming love. "You packed that bag because he threatened to destroy you. But you cried for me. You tried to fight for me when my own son threw my life in the garbage. You have a heart, Maya, and with this money, you are going to take your heart. You are going to go back to school. You are going to buy your own damn house. And you are never going to ask a man for permission to breathe ever again." Gloria picked up a sleek black Mont Blanc fountain pen from her pocket and pressed it into Maya's trembling hand. "Sign the papers, Maya," Gloria commanded, her eyes blazing with the fire of liberation. "Free yourself." Maya stood there for what felt like an eternity. She looked at the wheelchair in the corner. She looked at the woman who had just offered her an entirely new universe. She thought about the endless double shifts at the hospital, the overdue bills, the screaming matches in the kitchen, the shattered picture frame on the floor. She gripped the pen. With a deep, shuddering breath, Maya leaned over the baby-changing station. Her hand stopped trembling. She pressed the gold nib to the paper and signed her name with a bold, aggressive stroke. When she lifted the pen, the heavy, suffocating weight that had crushed her chest for the last 5 years instantly vanished. She felt light. She felt powerful. She felt alive. Gloria smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. She carefully folded the divorce papers and the check, sliding them into her own leather designer handbag. "Now," Gloria said, turning toward the bathroom mirror. She smoothed out the wrinkles in her silk blouse. She ran a hand through her silver hair, brushing it back with an undeniable, intimidating elegance. She looked into the glass, the reflection of the billionaire CEO finally aligning with reality. She turned back to Maya, her eyes narrowing with a dangerous, thrilling glint. "My son is waiting out there, thinking he just won the lottery," Gloria said, her voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. "Let's go show him exactly what happens when you try to bury a seed that hasn't sprouted yet." Maya wiped the last remaining tear from her cheek. Her spine straightened, mirroring the Titan standing beside her. "Let's go," Maya said, her voice finally steady. They didn't touch the wheelchair. They left it sitting empty in the middle of the room, a monument to a dead illusion. Gloria reached out, unlocked the deadbolt, and pushed the heavy metal door open. The deafening roar of the airport terminal rushed back in to greet them. But this time, they weren't victims navigating a chaotic world. They were the storm itself, walking out into the concourse, ready to burn an empire of lies straight to the ground. If ignorance is bliss, then David Hayes was standing at the check-in counter of Terminal 3 experiencing absolute, euphoric nirvana. He leaned against the cheap plastic podium of the budget airline, aggressively tapping his fake gold Rolex against the counter. He was annoyed that Maya was taking so long in the bathroom with the dead weight, but honestly, his mind was already miles away. He was picturing his living room without that cursed wheelchair. He was calculating how quickly he could list the house on the market, forge his mother's signature on a power of attorney, and cash out the equity. He was already spending the money in his head, a down payment on a new condo downtown, VIP bottle service, a life finally matching his monumental ego. "Sir, I need the passenger's ID to print the boarding pass," the exhausted gate agent droned, popping a bubble of chewing gum. "She'll be here in a second. Just get the luggage tags ready." David snapped back, rolling his eyes. He pulled out his phone, opening his front-facing camera to fix his hair, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire universe was about to violently collapse. "I wish you could have seen him in that exact moment." The narrator's voice steps in, heavy with disgust but lined with a sharp, thrilling anticipation. Standing there, so profoundly arrogant, he truly believed he was the smartest man in the room. He thought he had committed the perfect crime. But the universe has a very specific sense of humor when it comes to dealing with narcissists. And the punchline was pulling up to the curb. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the departure level, the chaotic flow of airport traffic suddenly choked. A low, guttural rumble shook the pavement. 4 massive, matte black Cadillac Escalades, their windows tinted so dark they looked like voids in space, swerved out of the moving traffic. They didn't park in the designated drop-off zone. They screeched to a halt directly in the middle of the crosswalk, effectively blocking all 3 lanes of Terminal 3. Angry taxi drivers started to honk, rolling down their windows to yell, but the honking died instantly. The heavy doors of the Escalades swung open in perfect, terrifying unison. 8 men stepped out onto the concrete. These weren't airport security guards. These were giants, ex-military contractors wearing impeccably tailored, pitch-black suits, tactical earpieces, and dark aviator sunglasses. They moved with the cold, mechanical precision of a wolf pack closing in on a kill. An airport police officer started to jog toward the vehicles, his hand resting on his radio, ready to write the biggest ticket of his career. The lead bodyguard, Marcus Vance, a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow and a stare that could freeze boiling water, stepped forward. He calmly flashed a gold titanium credential badge from his inner jacket pocket. The police officer took one look at the badge. His eyes widened in sheer panic, and he immediately stepped back, raising his hands in submissive apology. He began actively directing traffic away from the SUVs. Inside the terminal, the atmosphere shifted. You know that eerie, heavy silence that falls over a crowded room right before a bar fight breaks out? That is exactly what happened. The screaming children quieted down. The exhausted travelers looked up from their phones. The collective energy of 1,000 people suddenly focused entirely on the sliding glass doors. The doors parted. The 8 bodyguards walked in. They didn't rush. They didn't run. They marched. The synchronized clicking of their leather shoes on the linoleum floor echoed like a war drum. The dense, chaotic crowd of the budget terminal organically split down the middle, parting like the Red Sea, desperately getting out of the way of this overwhelming display of raw power. David, busy admiring his own reflection on his phone screen, finally noticed the strange silence. He looked up. He saw the wall of black suits marching straight toward his check-in counter. For a brief, hilarious second, David's ego actually tried to rationalize the situation. He puffed out his chest, adjusting his cheap navy blazer. He thought maybe a celebrity was in the building. Maybe a famous rapper or a high-profile politician was flying out, and these were his guys. He tried to look cool, leaning back against the counter, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was important enough to command this kind of presence. But the bodyguards didn't walk past him. They stopped, directly in front of him. They formed a tight, impenetrable semicircle, completely boxing David in against the ticketing counter. The gate agent behind the desk gasped, slowly backing away with her hands in the air. David's heart skipped a beat. The smug smile melted off his face, replaced by a sudden icy wave of primal terror. He looked at the massive men towering over him, seeing his own terrified, pathetic reflection in their dark sunglasses. Excuse me, brothers," David stammered, his voice cracking, his false bravado completely evaporating. Is there a problem here? You're blocking the counter. I'm trying to check my mother in." Marcus Vance, standing front and center, didn't move a muscle. He simply reached up to his earpiece, pressed a button, and spoke in a deep, gravelly voice that carried across the dead-silent terminal. "Target secured. Clear the path for the CEO." David blinked, utterly confused. CEO? Target? Before his brain could even begin to process the words, the wall of bodyguards slowly parted down the middle, creating a clear runway leading straight back toward the family restroom hallway. Click, clack, click, clack. It wasn't the agonizing squeak of rusty wheelchair wheels. It was the sharp, commanding sound of expensive designer heels hitting the floor. David craned his neck, looking down the human corridor. The breath was violently knocked out of his lungs. His brain, completely short-circuited, desperately trying to reject the impossible image marching toward him. It was Gloria. But it wasn't the fragile, hunched, pathetic old woman he had dumped out of his car 15 minutes ago. Gloria Hayes was walking. No, she wasn't just walking, she was gliding, radiating an aura of terrifying, unfathomable majesty. The faded, depressing cardigan was gone. She was wearing a stunning, tailored emerald green blazer over her pristine silk blouse, the color of old money and absolute authority. Her silver hair was swept back elegantly. Her posture was razor straight, and right beside her, walking shoulder to shoulder, was Maya. Maya, who had walked into this terminal looking like a broken slave, was now holding her head high, her eyes completely dry and burning with defiance. David's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His legs suddenly felt like they were made of jelly. He gripped the edge of the ticketing counter to keep himself from collapsing. "Mom." David finally choked out, the word sounding foreign and absurd on his tongue. He pointed a trembling, manic finger at her legs. You're walking, the wheelchair, the arthritis. What the hell is going on?" "Maya! Why is she out of the chair?" Gloria stopped exactly 3 feet in front of him. The sheer gravity of her presence made David feel like he was shrinking, turning back into a frightened little boy. Gloria didn't scream. She didn't cry. When you hold all the cards, you don't need to raise your voice. "The wheelchair," Gloria spoke, her voice smooth, calm, and utterly lethal, "was the only way to see if you had a soul, David. And it turns out, the chair was the only thing in that house holding any actual weight. The entire terminal was dead silent. Hundreds of strangers were holding their breath, watching the execution unfold. I don't understand, David gasped, sweat breaking out across his forehead. He looked at the bodyguards, then at his mother's expensive clothes, and finally at Maya's hardened face. Who are these people?
Mom, we have a flight to catch. The resort in Florida is waiting.
Gloria let out a low, chilling chuckle. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. A resort? Gloria asked, her voice dripping with venom. She raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Marcus Vance stepped forward and handed Gloria the manila folder David had given to Maya. Gloria opened it, pulled out the flimsy brochure for the Whispering Pines State Care Facility, and threw it directly into David's face. It fluttered to the ground, landing on his expensive shoes. You thought I was deaf, David? You thought I was blind? Gloria's voice began to rise, the righteous fury of a mother finally breaking through the corporate ice. You planned to dump me in an underfunded, abusive state-run warehouse. You bought me the budget terminal of Airport Gate 14 had completely come to a standstill. Every delayed passenger, every TSA agent, every exhausted mother holding a crying child stood frozen in place. Their eyes were locked on the spectacular, brutal downfall unfolding right there on the dirty linoleum. David Hayes was on his knees. The arrogant, tailored man who had strutted through life like he owned the entire world was now physically and mentally crumbling. His expensive suit was rumpled, his perfectly lined-up haircut disheveled, and his face was buried in his hands as he desperately clutched the hem of Gloria's silk blouse. He was openly, violently weeping. "Mom, Mom, please," David wailed, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched screech that echoed through the terminal. "I didn't mean it. It was just a mistake. I was stressed about money. You can't do this to me. I'm your flesh and blood. You're a billionaire. You can't just leave me with nothing." He frantically reached out his hand toward Maya, who stood securely and calmly behind the impenetrable wall of massive, stone-faced bodyguards.
Maya, baby, please. Talk to her. Tell her we love her. Tell her we're a family.
Maya didn't flinch. She looked down at the man she had served and feared for 5 years. She didn't see a powerful husband anymore. She just saw a terrified, pathetic little boy facing the catastrophic consequences of his own cruelty. Slowly, Maya raised her left hand, extending her fingers for him to see. The gold wedding band was gone. David let out a choked, guttural gasp, dropping his head to the floor as the reality of his absolute ruin finally set in. His bank accounts were frozen. His leased Mercedes was currently being repossessed from the curb outside by Vance's team. The house was locked and legally impenetrable. He was homeless, wifeless, and completely destitute. Gloria looked down at him. There was no anger left in her piercing dark eyes. There was no sadness, either. There was only the cold, empty vacuum of a closed chapter. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled, cheap boarding pass, the one-way ticket he had bought to throw her away. She held it out and simply let it fall from her fingers. It fluttered down, landing right in front of David's tear-soaked face. "A man who considers his mother a burden," Gloria said, her voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper that carried the weight of absolute finality, "shall be left to carry the crushing weight of absolutely nothing." She turned her back on him. "Survive, David, just like I had to." Gloria gave a brief nod to Vance. The wall of bodyguards parted seamlessly. Gloria and Maya walked away together, their heels clicking in perfect, powerful synchronization against the floor tiles. They left David screaming and sobbing on the floor of the budget terminal, surrounded by a crowd of strangers recording his ultimate karma on their phones. The scene shifts. The chaotic, deafening noise of the terminal fades away, replaced by the smooth, powerful hum of jet engines. Outside on the VIP tarmac, the sun was beginning to set, casting a brilliant, triumphant golden hour glow over the sleek black fuselage of Skyward Private Jet 01. Gloria and Maya stood at the top of the air stairs. The warm wind whipped through their hair. Maya looked out at the glowing horizon, clutching the designer handbag that held her $5 million check and her newfound freedom. A genuine, radiant smile broke across her face, the first real smile she had worn in years. Gloria placed a gentle, grounding hand on Maya's shoulder. They weren't just mother-in-law and daughter-in-law anymore. They were survivors. They had broken the curse. They were the queens of their own skies. They stepped inside the luxurious cabin, the heavy door pulled shut, sealing them in comfort, safety, and absolute peace. The engines roared to life. The massive jet taxied down the runway, gaining unstoppable speed, before lifting effortlessly into the endless, boundless blue. The ultimate justice had been delivered, not with a screaming match, but with the quiet, devastating elegance of a one-way ticket to the top.